Hey, I wanted to review a really interesting and instructive game played in the U.S. Women's Championship, starting with one knight f3. So this is very relevant for the one knight f3 lines that I recommend in my chessable course. This was played between Begum Tokhirjonova and Tokhirjonova-Yan in the Women's Championship. It starts with one knight f3, and after one of many possible move orders, Black goes for this very solid, what I call the Queen's Gambit decline setup, and White plays c4. So this is exactly how I recommend to play it in my course. And here, though, Black goes for something a bit unusual, d4. Most common is just castles, or sometimes you see Black players take on c4 as well, but castles is by far what you would expect to face. But here, Yan goes for d4. So the idea certainly makes sense, grabbing space in the center, but doing this before castling gives White an additional option, which he does take advantage of with b4. And you can do this because Queen a4 check is an important move if Black decides to take on b4, which in the game she did, which looks very risky to me at least, but I guess these kids aren't scared of anything. So Queen a4 check, the bishop on b4 is hit, so knight c6 is forced, and knight e5. And this already looks terrifying for Black because there's a ton of pressure on this knight. As soon as that drops off, this bishop is going to be loose. There's also, if White takes on c6, possible forks on the rook in the corner. So it looks almost like Black is just losing already. But she did come up with the only move to stay in the game, rook b8. And this is quite clever because the rook gets off that a8 square, which was dangerous, but also prepares to defend the bishop on b4, sort of through the pawn. And White has two reasonable ways to capture on c6, but neither of them actually goes anywhere. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes c6 check, but simply blocks with a bishop. And this is totally fine for Black. Or bishop takes, pawn takes, knight takes with a fork, which looks good, but queen d7, pin, and again, White doesn't really have anything here. If queen takes a7, rook b7, saving the rook and hitting the queen at the same time. So neither of these captures really work, and Begum thought for some time here and came up with a fantastic move, c5. And I was watching this game. It actually took me a little while to even understand the point of this move. Black can't really take because just takes, check, and that bishop is going to drop off. But what if simply castles? Well, then the real point of this move would be revealed with knight d3, really clever retreating move, hitting the bishop. It can't retreat because the pawn is blocking it, and the knight also protects the pawn. So the bishop is completely trapped, and bishop a5 also wouldn't help because just takes, removing the defender, and takes. But again, Yan came up with a super tricky move to try to stay in the game. Knight d7, hitting this knight, blocking the pin, but also preparing to take on c5, hitting White's queen. Very tricky. So bishop takes, pawn takes, knight takes c6. So White is attacking a lot of stuff, but knight takes e5, counterattacking the queen. And up until here, Begum has played an absolutely flawless game. But here she did go a bit wrong with queen d1. But I understand why she played this. She's thinking, okay, just the queen is safe, this queen is hit, it has to move, and I'll take a whole free rook. But it turns out this isn't so simple because after queen d5, knight takes b8, bishop b7, for the moment White's up a rook, but Black's threatening checkmate, that has to be answered. And this knight on b8 is going to be captured, it can't escape. So Black's only going to be down in exchange, and all of Black's pieces are very well developed and active. Black has control of the center, and White has nothing developed actually after that knight gets captured. So this is very reasonable compensation for an exchange. Now in the game, Begum did kind of reassert her control of the game, outplay her opponent from this point, and win a nice game. But as far as the opening, the best way to follow this up would have been not queen d1, but in fact queen takes a7. The queen and rook are hit here. And if rook b7 now, desperado with the queen, queen takes b7. And after any capture, take the queen, and white would come out up in exchange, which she also was in the game, also up in exchange, but in this case in an endgame with a much more comfortable position, and she got that she picked up that a7 pawn in the deal too. So this passed a pawn is also very dangerous in the endgame. So that was an interesting line, interesting update for one knight f3. Hope you enjoyed that and you got some ideas that you can use if you're using the one knight f3 repertoire.